Hi, Misha here, and we announced last month that I had picked up roughly 3 dozen pocket pistols, or vest pocket guns, or boomer pistols, and it's taken me a little while to get around to them, researching some, got some really interesting ones in there, did a little teaser video, a couple of shorts, even one on the personal channel. Now this is my good old Walther Model 4, in fact, it's only modeled Walther I own now. I've had 8s and 7s in the past, and this gun's pretty special to me. Essentially, I picked this up the day I found out I would be getting married. There's a whole story to it, we can get into it later, but it relates to this. I figured, talking about the little pocket guns, this is the Mishaco channel, we gotta start with a Walther, and this one was in. This is the Model 9. This was the smallest Walther really made, and the last in the numbered series, and I did own a Model 9 back in the day, and I sold it when we got married, paid for things, and it's the only gun I can recall my wife objecting to me selling. Not seriously, but you know, like, oh, you shouldn't have sold that, because she thought it was kind of neat. She's not a gun person, that's fine, different interests, she has her own, but she just thought it was kind of neat for how small it is, and it is tiny. So we're going to talk about it. And again, this is just the first of probably several pocket gun videos. But we're going to begin here. As always, if you could, like, share, subscribe. And if you'd like to help us out, check out the Patreon. With that, let's dive in. To understand the Model 9, we have to go back to the vest pocket market of the early 20th century. A market that FN, along with John Moses Browning, really helped get started. And for the purposes of this video, we'll start with the 1906 here, because this pistol introduced the 6.35 cartridge. It was a scaled-down striker-fired version of the 1903, which is hammer-fired and in a few different calibers. Either way, this came out and it really made a splash on the market for FN Hirsch style, and of course would be produced in America as the Colt 1908. But we'll talk about that more. That really got Walther going. The Carl Walther Company was established way back in 1886, but they didn't start thinking about getting into handguns really until 1906. And the earliest really rumblings of a new design would be in 1908. In 1909, Carl Walther, the original, first applied for patents, and that would move forward. They'd be granted in 1911. That would be the first self-loading pistol, and it would be chambered for the new hot 6.35 round, known in America as 25 ACP. Why this cartridge? Well, the idea was to have something like a 22, but that was designed to work reliably in self-loading guns, automatics, and be safe. So going away from rim fire to center fire to, recessing the rim, what have you. While Walther started marketing their initial automatic pistol in 1911, it didn't really take off until 1912, 1913. And they would continue to refine the design. They would actually change the takedown method a bit, adding a button and a few other things like that. The slide legends would change. In fact, the first guns didn't even have the now famous Walther banner. That did not appear until late 1912 or even early 1913. And so there's variations to do with that. But honestly, the gun was a good first effort, but Walther is still working on their manufacturing standards, and they also had some issues. It was a fine enough pistol, but it was a little fiddly to disassemble, reassemble, had a lot of small parts that could be lost or damaged. It had shortcomings. And the Model 4 is part of the family that was intended to replace it. As early as 1911, efforts were underway and patents were being filed for to replace with this pistol. And this is kind of inspired by FN's next brainchild, the model 1910. I don't have a 1910, but I have a 1022, which was the extended barrel, extended grip version introduced, well, in the 1920s. But the assembly's the same. The main deal here, we have the recoil spring around the barrel, and we've updated the striker firing system and just really refined the design. The 1910 was very popular, well, at least unless you were an Archduke. Alright, so the Model 4 here is actually a hammered fired gun. Single action, of course, but it's got a concealed hammer inside. Now this was based on the Model 3, but given this extension, a la FN 22 style, and a longer grip. So concealed hammer, manual safety here, no holdback device, at least automatic. And it was a military gun. Early versions like this have the exposed sear bar, later did not. Neat little gun. Heel mag release. Yeah. But Walther actually got started with the Model 1, because that's how numbers work. And the Model 9, the last of the number guns, was actually very much based on the Model 1. And they wanted to make a small gun to compete with the FN offerings and others. So they revisited this, and because of its size, they had to go back to striker fired versus concealed hammer. I don't have a Model 1 to show you. They're not all that common in America. There's a reason for that, and not all that many were made. It was just a beginning. So we'll just have this here while I talk about it. And I've kind of lied to you. It wasn't known as the Model 1. Not initially. When patents were applied for and all that, the original name was essentially German automatic pistol for Walther, Model 1909, although that was not written on the gun. And it would be in, like I said, 6.35 and striker fired. And it does share a lot with this. It had the open-topped barrel slide, the barrel system, the slide system. That was actually part of the patents. Like the Model 9, the Model 1 had the recoil spring under the barrel, but in a much more compact way compared to FN's 1906 offering. And it is striker fired, in plate, what have you. So yeah, back to Walther in 1911, they worked on a new design that would have a concealed hammer for reliability. And they, too, would introduce a recoil spring around the barrel. Kind of, it was its own thing, but yeah, go into that. And that would start not with the Model 2, but technically with the Model 3 in 1913, which was the little brother to this one, shorter barrel, shorter grip. So the original pattern was in 32, 7.65. It would be scaled down as the Model 2, and then the naming system would be reorganized in 1914. This is when the Model 1 became the Model 1. It went from being the automatic pistol of 1909 to the Model 1, and it was officially being replaced by the Model 2. So the Model 2 was the 25 caliber, and the Model 3 was the larger 32 caliber. But actually, not many Model 3s were made, because by the time the war was going on, a short time later, the upscaled Model 4 was made for military contracts. But no matter barrel length, size, even caliber, they're very, very similar guns. Just to put it out, the Model 5 was essentially a rebranded Model 2, and the Model 7 was a upscaled 8-shot or 8+1 version of the Model 5, Model 2, still in 25, really just made in 1917, 1918, although they did carry them over past the Great War. You have simple spring and firing pin, and when you release, goes forward. Exposed barrel. Recoil spring is actually under the barrel here, whereas on the Model 4 it's around the barrel. You have a heel mag release for this tiny little mag. Yeah. The 1 and the 9 have different mag catches. This is a, more standard design where you pull back. Well, the original one you actually push forward. It was based on the FN Model 1899. Little difference there. You do have an exposed sear bar here, but it's on the opposite side. And you do have this tiny little safety. And you actually press it in to move it. It's, that way it doesn't accidentally get hit. So you need to put a little pressure onto it. The safety is also very different. The Model 1 actually had a cross bolt safety, cross pin, but lever safeties were the name of the game, and it's logical. Disassembly was made much easier and simpler, and in fact there's not even a guide rod for the recoil spring under the barrel. Obviously we don't have the button for disassembly like on the late Model 1s. The Model 9 first appeared in 1921, so shortly after the Model 8. The earlier Model 5s would finally be taken out of production in 1923 once the Model 8 was well established. And this would be the little scale version. It really didn't replace anything because the Model 1 had been out of production for a very long time. In fact, I believe they stopped making those by World War I. And they only made about 31,000 or even 30,000, some sources say, Model 1s. As I said at the beginning, there's a reason it's not a very common gun here. The majority were sold within Germany, especially early on production. Then you start to see them spread out a little bit through Europe, especially Austria. And you only see maybe the last couple of thousand Model 1s sent over to the USA. And they'll be marked made in Germany if they were. And of course, World War I played a big part in this, and some could come over after the war, obviously. But by that point, the new hammer designs were taking over, and Walther had improved things. Also, I should point out that the original introducer, Carl Walther, passed away in 1915, and that left his son Fritz to be the primary heir to his empire. There were other sons, but Fritz really kind of took over in different directions. So when they went back to the striker system, it was the first time Fritz had really played with it. And they knew going to the striker system, it was not going to be as reliable as the internal hammer. It just couldn't hit it with as much strength. But they had to have that goal of smallest 25 on the market. And they did. This thing is 4 inches front to back. But a lot of that is actually barrel. It's about 2.8 inches barrel. And since it is all metal, even though it's small, it weighs just a hair over 9 ounces unloaded. So, but that kind of threw down the gauntlet. FN was doing well with their 1906 and 25. They had the 1910 and now the 1922 and 32 and 380 9mm Kerrs. But with Walther's Model 8 and Model 9, this made FN kind of up their game. And this actually caused them to introduce the Baby Browning in 1931-32. Ironically, sometimes the 1906 was nicknamed the Baby Browning, but now we're talking about the one that was actually the Baby Browning. And it was very similar in size to this, only about a 1/4 inch longer, with a less than 1/2 inch longer barrel, and weighed a little more, but yeah. So the race was on. You had the Browning or the FN, I should say, even though it was actually known as a Browning, and the Walther competing. I don't know, but they did actually have the smallest little vest pocket. But the sacrifice was going to striker. and it was still more complicated than, like the hammer guns like this. Ironically, the Model 9 was known to be more accurate than the Baby Browning. So it was known for accuracy. It was also more accurate than the previous Model 5. So it was a good little gun, and it was quite popular. And it actually would stay into production into the World War II era. And these are the kind of rubberized grips with the medallion. And there are several variations of this. So the hard rubber grips, at least the medallion style ones, were actually taken from the Model 8. Now the medallions were only on the first variation of the Model 9. And we had a total of 3 major ones. Like I said, the first ones had the medallions. Look cool, but a little hard to attach. The second variation went to simple washer screw arrangements. And the third variation, which was made in the 1930s and 40s, actually added a magazine disconnect safety. So this is quite obviously not a third variation. Fun fact, this was not the first time that Walther tried disconnect safeties. It was actually a feature trialed out on the Model 2, along with an automatic rear sight. Remember how I said there's a reason for that groove? Well, with the Model 2, one of the options was to have a rear sight that would pop up only when there was a round in the chamber. And this same version would also have that magazine disconnect safety. But both features were not always on there. They were kind of more the deluxe version, and they were essentially dropped because, complexity and what have you. So the disconnect and that automatic would disappear. The automatic would never come back as such, and we'd have the sighting groove. But with the later style Model 9s, we'd at least get the disconnect safety back, which makes sense. No one knows exactly how many were made, but in all 3 variations, estimates are roughly 250,000, 250,000. So it ran from 1921 really into about 1944, although 1940s production was very small for these, and mostly just using up existing parts. They didn't really have the resources for luxuries like a little pocket gun at that point. But I will say that 6.35 guns, mostly the Model 8, did serve in the Wehrmacht, the Luftwaffe, the SS, government officials throughout the world wars. So they were in service. The Model 7 was used in World War I. Of course, the Model 4 in 1932 was very much used. And soon, Walther would really make a name for itself with the PP, PPK series, P38. And it all started with the Model 1. And it's, I guess, fitting that the number series began and ended with such a similar little design. Alrighty guys, appreciate you tuning in, staying with me on the first pocket pistol video. Some like this Model 9 I do know a bit about, but there are others, for example the Weblies. There's a South African in there I don't know much about. So I'm learning, and what I learn I'll share with you. And there are a lot of good websites out there. I've always used Unblinking Eye for a lot of these little guns. He tends to have a lot of 22, 25, 32, some 380, but mostly the littler guns. But it's only the beginning, so let me know what you think. Check out the original teaser video. If you see one in there you'd like to kind of put to the front of the queue, let me know, and I'll do my best to do it. But yeah, got to start with the Walther, guys. It is so small. Look. It's not too heavy, but it is all metal. It's kind of remarkable. a gun made 100 years ago was still nominally functional today. If you think about it, that's impressive. That really speaks to engineering and metallurgy. And a lot of guns hold up today. I mean, this one is 110 years old, or nearly, and it still shoots. It's actually still got a really good spring in it. Pretty nice trigger. That's a story for another day in the Model 4. Do you own any pocket guns? Any 25s? I've always had ammo around, even if I haven't always had guns to shoot it. Just kind of had a box or two that hung around. But if you've got one, I'd love to hear about yours in the comments. Share all that. If you'd like to help out, check out Patreon. With that, this is Misha, and we'll vest you very soon next time.